I had to really question myself. I was concerned about being a Christian and owning a bar.
Right.
That was a big hurdle for me to get past. And it was my brother-in-law again, John, that said, maybe that's where God has you, for a purpose and a reason. And as a result, it became more of a mission field than an obstacle to my journey of sanctification and faith.
From Fiore Communications, it's How I Got Here, a show of inspiring stories from Tallahassee area leaders, business owners, and neighbors. All the challenges, opportunities, inspirations, the twists and turns of life that led them to where they are today. Everyone has a story worth telling, and I am really grateful that we get to bring a few of them to you. I truly have been changed by my conversations with these amazing people, and I'm confident you will be too. I'm Dave Fiore, and in this episode I speak with Drew McLeod, well-known restaurateur who has owned or managed some of the area's most iconic restaurants from midtown to the coast over the last 3 decades. But Drew's life has had many courses, including times of strained family relationships, drug addiction, and significant financial loss that merely set the stage for his real story of redemption. Instead of pursuing money and prestige, Drew is now driven by gratitude and faithfulness in his relationships with God and the people in his life. We start by discussing how Drew would describe himself today.
I think first and foremost at this point in my life, it's important that I express to people my faith in God and who I am as a husband and father. It took me a long time to understand what my role would be probably in life. And although I've enjoyed my career as an entrepreneur, it's not the most important thing anymore. So when I think about what I want people to know about me, it's that they can trust me, and that I'm going to be honest with them. And although some may not like to hear the truth all the time, I'm pretty black and white when it comes to my principles. So I think I perceive myself as being a very kind person, passionate about what I do and compassionate for people. And so the most important thing outside of my faith is the relationships I have with people, family, friends, coworkers, peers. And so for me, it's just about being true to myself and being true to others.
That sounds like a position that you've kind of evolved into over time.
Very much so, because I think there was a point in my life when none of that was true. So to get to a place where I'm comfortable with who I am and able to share that with others, I really look at my career, and the legacy that I leave behind is not about what I've accomplished, but what others have gone on to do, having been influenced or mentored by me. And the legacy that I have as a man and as a father will shine through my children. So for me, it's been quite a journey.
Mm. Well, that's good, because we're going to talk about that journey right now. So I know you went to Lincoln High School, right?
I did for a year.
Okay. I should know this. Did you grow up in Tallahassee?
I did not.
Okay. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Miami. My parents moved to Miami in 1960 from New England. My father was in the financial sector, and Miami was a new market in many ways. And so they moved in 1960. I was born in 63. Pretty typical childhood, Christian parents. went to good schools, private schools, parochial schools. And then my dad had a heart attack at 32, very young age, and it affected his ability to keep his job. It was a financial hit for the family, and we had to move away from the neighborhood we were in. And ultimately, he recovered, and but we kind of changed from private schools to public schools. So there was a big transition for me. I began public schools in ninth grade, and ultimately, into high school in a public school setting, which was fine for me. I was an athlete. I played soccer at a high level, and but
people in America were playing soccer back then.
Could you believe that? Yeah, Miami may have been the only place that was happening, but it was somewhat popular for us. And
so, is your mom, your dad, you, and your brother,
and my sister? I have an older sister.
Okay,
my oldest sister, and then my brother, and then myself. So 3 kids. My brother was an equestrian and was very much involved with that kind of space. And, at the summer of 1980, my parents wanted to get out of Miami. The influence on me was not great. I had started dabbling in drugs, at 14, 15, and 16. And, they felt like Miami was not the place for me to be.
What do you think led to you getting into that at that early of an age?
I guess, everybody was smoking pot, and I was part of that culture, whether it was soccer, I don't know. It was just the people I was around,
Right.
And the influence, and it just seemed harmless, at the time. And quite honestly, we didn't think much of it,
When you say Miami, were you in the city of Miami?
No, we were in the suburbs.
Okay.
We were in Kendall, which was still developing at that time. So, but yeah, we dabbled in, marijuana. We, that would lead to other drugs that were, well, again, we thought seemingly harmless, but ultimately weren't. And that led to taking some pills and things like that. So I think it's odd, but it was purely recreational. It wasn't like we were, I don't know, we didn't feel like we were druggies, but
Right.
I guess in essence, we kind of were.
So your mom wanted to get you out of that environment?
Yeah, I don't know that she ever knew the degree, that we were involved with that. I think she knew we smoked pot. She didn't like it, of course, and she tried to control it. And when she found things, she would, ground us and do the things that parents thought that they should do to prevent us from using them. But
Right.
Ultimately, it was their decision that, Miami was not where they wanted to be. It wasn't necessarily the best place my dad needed to be in terms of his career. And so they decided that they wanted to move to, they looked at Ocala and then settled on Tallahassee. And, that was tough on me. I did not want to go. I was going into my senior year. It was a new high school that I would have been the first graduating class of in Miami Sunset. So it opened in 1978. I came in as a sophomore. I would have been the first full graduating class. And, coming up Tallahassee, I didn't know anything about it. And
Why Tallahassee?
I think my dad found a job really
Okay.
that was suitable with rose printing. And, they did their research, and they had other friends up here. A couple of families that they knew in Miami that had settled here. And I think that gave them a level of comfort that they might not have had in going to some place they really didn't know anyone. So that was part of it.
So you were unhappy about leaving what you knew and
Yeah.
friends and
Finishing out my, soccer career and maybe taking that to the next level. I really thought, I'd play college ball or something. And not graduating with my friends, leaving a girlfriend, a number of things, and going into the unknown. And I was pretty angry. And but that summer of 1980, prior to moving up here for the fall, there were two deaths or 3 deaths really that affected me that summer. And One was a guy that was a friend of mine's best friend. So I didn't know him real well. I'd met him, and I don't know if I can use names or not, but
Sure.
Billy Zane was his name, and he committed suicide after a bad acid trip. And not knowing him, but knowing he was a good friend of my best friend's, that was difficult to understand at 16, and I was 16 at that time. And then my girlfriend's best friend was raped and murdered, and never really understood it all, but that affected her tremendously, obviously. And then there was the guy that we shared same first name, Drew Settle was his name, and he was an Olympic platform diver, or potentially becoming one.
Right.
And there was a place that we used to go, like a swimming hole called the West 40s in Miami, and he had climbed a tree and jumped into the water and snapped his neck and died.
Wow.
And this all happened
One summer?
Yeah, within like a couple of months.
Wow.
And I was threatening my parents that I was going to stay in Miami, that y'all could go, and that was probably a empty or shallow threat at best. I was going, kicking and screaming perhaps, but when all that happened, I thought, well, maybe a new beginning, a new place would be okay. And although I don't think I was ever really on board 100%, and we're talking 40 years ago, so
Right.
that probably made it a little easier for me to agree to go or come to Tallahassee.
Wow, I can't even imagine. I mean, that is a lot to deal with at one time.
It was
It's a lot to deal with spread out over years,
Yeah.
much less all in a couple of months.
and then coming to Tallahassee, I had one friend that I knew in Miami, Danny Posey, and he had adapted already. He'd been up here, so he went from being a Miami guy to a redneck. That's what we had to do. So
My roommate in college, my freshman year, was from Miami, and he was not thrilled with Tallahassee. I'll just leave it at that. He could not wait to get back home.
well, I had to cut my hair and get rid of the clogs and get some cowboy boots and change the way I.
So you acclimated quickly, right?
I did. The first day at Lincoln was a little difficult for me. I was a scrapper growing up, so I kind of ran my mouth a lot. I was small, not as small as I used to be, but I was small in high school. And as a goalkeeper in soccer, I was just very aggressive, and so I was known to be a scrapper. And apparently, the setup was coming to Tallahassee. The one guy I knew, Danny, said that I was some kind of fighter, and I really wasn't in my mind. It's pretty easygoing and not
Right.
difficult to get along with, but that was a reputation that I stepped into day one. And day one, I got in a fight in the hallways, and
Somebody wanted to see how much of a fighter you were.
that's right. A guy named Ricky. And you know how it works out. We ended up becoming friends because anytime you have a fight, that seems to be the case. But I was walking the hallways kind of lost. And, he said, "You that new kid from Miami?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I guess so." And I hadn't traded in my clogs yet at that point. But so I looked a little different than everybody else in the school. But he challenged me, and I hit him pretty hard, and he went down. And then Coach Easom came out and asked what was going on, and I said I really didn't know, and he saw what was there, and I went and met Doug Frick, the principal, first day of school.
A nice way to start.
Yeah, that was cool.
But I assume things got better from there as far as relationships.
They did. Tallahassee was not a hotbed for soccer, and there were some, and I acclimated into some guys that had an interest in playing soccer, and that really kind of made it a lot easier to kind of acclimate, as you suggested. We started playing together, and although Lincoln didn't have a varsity high school soccer team at the time, we played some friendly games with other schools and had a great time.
So there was a club, essentially.
Yeah, it was
right?
a club. Yeah.
That's good. At least you had that.
No, it helped a lot. And I, again, was trying to get to know Tallahassee and came to enjoy it and like it.
So you decide after high school, you decided to stay in town and you went to Tallahassee Community College,
I did.
right?
I did. My brother was at University of Florida. I had, I think, been accepted to both FSU and UF, but a lot of friends were going to TCC, and it seemed like a pretty good transition for me. I was working. So I really hadn't reconciled with my parents to the degree that I probably needed to. So the day after high school graduation, they were going to Atlanta for a Mary Kay event conference, and I moved out. And I was 17.
Did they know you were moving out?
No. They came home and found out and weren't too pleased.
Yeah.
I had been working at a gas station in Killarn, Chevron station owned by Mark Hare, and moved in with one of the mechanics and right behind Leon High School, and had a bicycle, and that was about it.
You were good to go.
I was good to go. And so, I moved out and decided I was going to be on my own.
Was the stress with your parents still over the move, or was it deeper than that?
I think probably in a little bit. And, that yearning for independence, and I can do it.
And that's a natural thing.
It was pretty naive. I mean, obviously I didn't really have great transportation. I had a bicycle. I would bike literally
and there are more hills here than there are in Miami.
Gosh, I was biking 25 miles a day. I actually rode from Leon High School out to Tallahassee Community College. That first semester I was there. I didn't get my first car until January of, 82. And so, my parents were concerned because it got cold in Tallahassee, which I did never experience in Miami. And so riding your bike in 35, 40 degree weather wasn't a whole lot of fun.
A little different.
Yeah. Mom would pick me up and, drive me on those super cold days. And we reconciled, but ultimately I was smart and I could pass tests really well. I didn't have to study a whole lot. It came kind of too easy, but I never applied myself. So B's and C's were fine as far as I was concerned, as long as I could get through.
You just didn't care? You didn't see the point in it?
No, because I guess at that point I just never knew what direction I was going to go. I was lost. I mean, I really just didn't know what I wanted to do or where I wanted to do it. And so it was just a matter of, getting through, believing that college was just something that you had to do. But prior to the summer of 1983, I needed 21 hours to graduate to get to University of Florida, because back then, if you got the AA degree, you could go to any other state university. So I think TCC to FSU now.
You still can. Yeah.
Santa Fe.
Still the same deal.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I wanted to get to Gainesville and be with my brother. And I got a 3.0. I got an A, 5 Bs, and a C.
Right.
As I recall. Pretty solid. And moved to Gainesville.
So you're kind of achieving your next dream or the goal in your life.
I don't think it was even a dream or a goal. It was like
going to Gainesville wasn't a dream?
I think it was like get out of Tallahassee. I mean, it was like I was running. I was still kind of just wanted to get away from whatever that was, those 3 years in Tallahassee. I just was ready to do something different. And,
so was Gainesville the difference you were looking for?
No, Gainesville probably exacerbated the bad habits that I had already begun to create in my life. I think my dad once said that I majored in lifestyle and I got straight A's in that. So it was one of those things that before I left Tallahassee, I had the opportunity to work in a restaurant, Simon Malone's on the Parkway. Yeah. And I'd already worked at Pizza Pro for the Loudermilks, and I was already understanding that, hospitality and food service was something that I had an interest and a gift for doing. And when I transferred to Gainesville, Steak and Ale was being built, and I had the opportunity to kind of go in there and be a bartender and, help pay for school. I was getting some Pell Grants, and that just became kind of the new lifestyle was bartending, and you get into that lifestyle, it's a little bit different. So again, school was never a primary focus. I took classes that I wanted to in the business school, but I wasn't really achieving a whole lot, I don't think.
So at this point, was food service a passion for you, or was it just a good job and you were good at it and it just worked out?
Yeah, I think more so that, not really a passion. I probably saw some of the potential, but what I really saw was the cash. For me, it was a cash cow. I mean, it was quick money. It was short shifts. I could still, party after work because I worked at a place that wasn't open until 2 a.m. kind of thing. So for me, it was just a means to an end at that point, and not really a passion. But I was good at it. I mean, I could make pizzas or serve drinks or, be a server. I mean, I got a lot of early experience that has since helped me, but at the time was just really an opportunity to pay the bills and to play.
So did you finish your degree at Florida?
No.
So
my career was quickly coming to a halt. Grades were not what they needed to be. Although I'm very good in math, calculus just threw me a loop. My brother was like a tutor in calculus, but sometimes taking lessons from a family member doesn't work out so well.
Right.
But no, I had met a girl, and she was from Boca Raton, Florida, and there was an opportunity in '85 to move to that area. I actually moved in with her parents and went right into the world of hospitality, and they were gracious enough to let me stay there and make some money and get caught up even before she had come back down. She was finishing school, and I did that for a while, and somehow I got onto a temporary job with IBM, which their corporate headquarters were in Boca Raton at that time. And I thought, hey, okay, maybe I can do something here. So I came in as a very low-level, entry-level employee for IBM as a temporary worker, never got full-time status, but it gave me a new understanding and an intrigue for technology that has kind of lasted, and helped me over the years.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, all right, so you leave Gainesville, you're in Boca.
Yeah.
Working in the restaurant business, because I look at your resume and it's, over 30 years, and we're not going to have time to get into all the stops but we're going to hit the highlights.
Sure.
But there was about a 6-year gap, it looks like, between leaving Gainesville and opening up your restaurant in Quincy.
Right.
So you spent that time down in South Florida?
Right. So most of it. So from 85-ish, when I moved down there, 86 to 88, or what I kind of call the lost years. So, and I've never really told this story publicly. So, some of the friends that this girl that I was seeing were involved in a marijuana smuggling group out of Boca, and they were recruiting, so to speak, friends that would help them affect this process. And they were smuggling thousands of pounds of marijuana from Jamaica via sailboat into the Keys, and then running it up to Boca, and then from Boca distributing it up to Baltimore, New York, and Detroit. And they were looking for couples to drive it out, so to speak, so it would look nondescript.
Right.
You go down to the Keys, you're wearing shorts and sandals, and they're loading up trunks of cars, and you're driving basically for periods of time, and it's very, very lucrative. And so for about 18 months, I was involved with that, and they were friends, and it only happened every 3 or 4 months, and you'd get paid tens of thousands of dollars. And I was still working in the restaurant business. I was waiting tables at L&N Seafood Grill in Boca, and, just the average guy, but nobody really knew what was happening on the underneath,
right.
Except for I was able to buy a condo, I was able to buy a car, and all of a sudden, it's pretty interesting how a guy who's just waiting tables has the ability to do some things that you wouldn't expect. But we did that for 16 months, and they ended up getting busted, and it was a big deal. It was on the cover of the Tampa Tribune. They got found out and infiltrated by the DEA and arrested on Apollo Beach in Tampa. And I thought for sure I was going to be in trouble and that it would be traced back to me because we all had cars registered from Maryland. I mean, there was a whole bunch of things that went with this story, but ultimately nothing. They didn't care about me. And I realized.
Or your girlfriend either?
No, not at all. It was the others that were really making the big dogs. So at that point, things kind of fell apart for her and I, and I slipped into a world that was very dark, and it led to drug use on a much bigger scale. And it wasn't just marijuana, it was cocaine, and cocaine led to smoking crack. And I basically became a crackhead for a bit over a year. And, that's when my brother reached out to my parents and said, you got to get him home. And so in 1988, they came and got me. And I reluctantly left and came home to Tallahassee. And it was so cathartic because I was so ready. I was so tired. And as many people who had a, drug-filled life will tell you, I was just tired. I was exhausted. And, the love of my parents was stronger than the drug. And I quit cold turkey. Most people don't.
Yeah, I mean, crack is something that's, from what I understand, pretty hard to just walk away from.
Yeah. I don't know what it was. I mean, my parents have been praying for me, and I was aware of the truth in my upbringing, but they prayed me through it. And when I came home, I was just like, I'm done. And I went to some meetings. It didn't mean that I didn't make an effort, but NA and AA meetings, and but I was convinced, and still am to this day, that God cured me of it quickly, and for whatever reason, for His purpose, and never looked back. And that was 1988. So here we are today, 31 years later, and so home to Tallahassee. Here I am.
Yeah. So you have to think about, I guess, sometimes your brother rescuing you and helping get you out of that, and your parents coming to get you. I mean, it could have gone another way.
Oh, very much so. My brother was, equally familiar with the power of drugs, and I think he knew that I was over the edge, and if he didn't reach down and pull me up, then I was definitely probably on a road to death. I mean, and probably not even, I say directly from the drug use, but from driving vehicles, or what I'm saying. I had a couple of accidents.
It was dangerous all the way around.
I wrecked a couple of cars. It wasn't like I was, being really responsible in my use. So, and I was trying to function too. I was trying to make money somehow and waiting tables or something. So, yeah, absolutely. I credit him with pushing me home and my parents coming down and snatching me up,
So a couple years later, 1991, you opened up the Gables in Quincy.
I did. I spent the first year in Tallahassee working and traveling with merchandising and marketing associates, some friends of ours. And then my mom told me that a restaurant that they liked, JV's North, Fincher Smith, was opening a new place in Panacea. And in 1989, he was opening JV's Port Panacea up, and it seemed like a good fit. And Fincher was a great guy, and probably would be a good place for me to go or whatever. And so I spent really 2 years with Fincher. The JV's Port Panacea thing didn't work out really well for him. And I went to JV's North and worked with him and Bobby Harrison for a period of time. And we actually tried to buy JV's North. Bobby had left to open up Old Town Cafe. And my dad was, trying to figure out a way, hey, if you could buy JB's North, wouldn't that be great? And I'm like, yeah, that would be awesome. I'm 27 years old or something and going, yeah, that'd be great. But couldn't make that work. And we found a place in Quincy called the Gables that had been open. And they had closed. That should have been a first indication not to go. I have a mentor by the name of CC Sellers who told me, who owns Golden Eagle. He said, don't do it. But sure enough, borrowed some money. And on April 1st, another indicator, April Fool's Day of 1991.
There was writing on the wall.
There really was. I opened up the Gables, and it was, an upscale dining in a turn of the century home that had been converted into a restaurant. And although not a whole lot of financial success, just a great way for me to learn from my dad, who came up and taught me the accounting cycle, which I was familiar with, but not to the degree that he could school me, and just learned so much at a young age. And I was engaged. I had met, the queen of my dreams, and it was just a great opportunity for me. Look, this is mine. Can I do it? Ultimately, I think I learned to measure success differently. It wasn't just financial, and we had some great success in how we treated people. Now I'm an employer that's not just a manager. What it meant to sign the front of the check and not just the back of the check. There was a lot of growth in me because I was still trying to figure out who is the new Drew McLeod, coming off of what I did. So
did you feel this was the period of transformation or transition for you into the scare and where you were in your life, come back up here, kind of get a new start? Is this kind of where you see that point in your life?
I think it was the first step in getting there. When the Gables didn't work out, and Fincher and we got married in February of '92, and I told Kim at the time, it might be a good time to pull out of not getting married to me, because now I have closed the restaurant November 1st. I was open 7 months and had no money, didn't have a job, that kind of thing. The people of Quincy lifted me up and had embraced me as a family member. Herschel Williams, who was the banker, Bud Branson, another banker, Susan Henson, who was like a second mom to me. They were just so good to me, and we started catering and doing some things. So they helped me really get out of the financial debt, that accumulated through the experience of the Gables. But, Kim and I got married, wasn't sure what we were going to do. And Fincher came along, and said, hey, the old Coconut Cowboy is closed down, and I'd like to do something there, and I'd like you to come take a look at it. And I did. And he said something to the effect of, yeah, you can run this for me. I said, listen, I'll be your partner, but I'm not really going to work for anybody again. I'm going to try and, take a different approach to things now that I've had a taste of it. And he says, no, we can be partners. And that's where the genesis of Paradise Grill and Bar came from.
And it's an iconic spot in Tallahassee.
Well, sure. I mean, it was Blue Heaven in the 20s. It became Mutt and Jeff's in the 50s and closed in 79 or 80 as Mutt and Jeff's, became a couple other regular businesses. But, he got in control of the property, and from Bill Childers, who owned it and used it as his construction office. And ultimately, he said, hey, what can we do with this? It's already been kind of converted into a restaurant. Maybe you have an idea. And Fincher and I really respected each other. And quite honestly, we didn't know what we were going to do. And it was my brother-in-law, John Hammett, who said, oh, well, you love fishing and you ought to do something seafoody, like maybe call it Paradise Grill and Bar. And that's where the name came from. I give John 100% credit for that. And but that gave us a direction. When you have a name, you can kind of go, okay, we're going to do something kind of islandy. And, that was the beginning of what became an iconic 18-year run.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, Paradise played a very big role in the Tallahassee food scene for a long time. So tell me what that was like. I mean, it was great restaurant, great night scene, right? Live music.
Right.
Tell me about all that.
I always wanted the emphasis to be on the food, not on the bar. And that's why it was Grill and Bar, not Bar and Grill. And it became more of a Friday night bar that we never really expected. We kept expanding the deck as much as we could to accommodate more people.
Overlooking the police station.
Overlooking the police station. And, we did have very good food. I consider myself a very good cook. It was more about keeping it simple and keeping it to the basics, but had some great people working for us and just came up with a menu that connected with people. It wasn't too pricey. Lunch, we didn't open for lunch the first 6 months because I knew we had to get that right. And, you got 42 minutes to get people in and out.
Right.
We wanted to kind of perfect our operations and processes before we attempted that. But ultimately, great dinner business, good lunch business. And then the Friday night business just became iconic, and it was big. And, we started out having live bands and, late night DJ and
what was your favorite band you ever had there?
Oh, that's not even a fair question to ask, is it? Oh, wow. I know the guys in all the other bands and I love them all, but Tony O'Donnell and the Groove Merchants were by far, not by far, but one of the funnest things. And they didn't play as much as some of the others. So when they came, it was kind of a special event.
Right.
Crooked Shoes and CPR and all the guys, King Cotton. I can name them all, but they were awesome. And they really made it what it was. And the interesting thing that we had was this market segmentation that was very unique. So we'd have some of the older groups that were over 40, up to 60 coming in and staying till about 10 o'clock. And then there was this huge transition at 11 o'clock that dropped to under 25. And, the DJ kicked in and went till 2 in the morning. So it was fantastic. It was a great run. And it led to the other opportunities that Fincher and I pursued, from a management company to Finney's on St. George Island, where we were there for 12 years. We operated Angelo's 97 to 98. It was kind of an experiment gone bad, perhaps, but we had a management company that operated other businesses, one in Bainbridge, and I was able to work with some other people on opening a produce company, and so it really was the hub of who we were.
Hey, everybody. Just a quick reminder that this episode is brought to you by Fiore Communications. Just like people, every business has a story to tell, and we've been helping our clients tell their story since 2001, because who you are as a company is just as important as what you do. To learn more about how telling your story can make a difference in your business, visit fiorecommunications.com. Thanks again for listening. Now back to the show. What was your life like then in terms of hours worked and family life? That had to be tough.
Well, I can tell you this, it wasn't real healthy for a newlywed couple. We got married in 92. We opened up Paradise July 15th of 92. And, I thought I was on top of the world. We hit success pretty early, and, Kim and I were able to build a home, and we had no children. She was involved with Mary Kay and her work. And, but we were, proverbially passing like two ships in the night. I was working late nights. Fortunately, we were able to build our home on family property. So she was closer to her parents and her sister, which was comforting for me to know that she was surrounded by family when I was working late. But it wasn't a healthy environment for me. There was never a lapse into drugs or anything like that, but certainly not a healthy environment and late nights. And it
was a scene that was similar to when it was some problem times for you in the past.
Yeah. And Kim and I got distant for a period of time, and we were, too early. And fortunately, her sister, Dana, and her husband, John, saw some of those things, and Kim had expressed some of those things to her, and we were just distant. And they prayed and prayed and prayed, and an opportunity came for me in May of 1995 to go to a Promise Keepers event, and I was open to it. I wasn't no, I'm never going kind of thing. I was like, okay, sure. I was going with my brother-in-law and who I love and got along with wonderfully. And that was the change in my life that will forever be marked about who I am now. For those that don't know, Promise Keepers was a big evangelical movement started by Bill McCartney, the former head football coach at Colorado. And he was doing these big stadium events,
right.
and they're revival, and they had fantastic speakers. They really spoke truth. And there I was in the Atlanta, Georgia Dome, in the back of the stadium, furthest from the stage that you could be, amongst 60,000 men,
right.
all giving praise and worship to Jesus Christ. And, near the end, obviously, there was an altar call, and, I couldn't stay in my seat. And, it was at that point that I came down and I surrendered my life to Jesus Christ. And it was the most remarkable, transformative event in my life. That
Did you know you were different after that day?
Oh, there's no question. I mean, there was so many questions that I had, and of course, being a new Christian, and I knew a lot of it. I had a lot of head knowledge. I'd had spiritual experiences before. In fact, even before I left Tallahassee and went to Gainesville, I thought I'd become a Christian. Never got any spiritual food, but was always open. And I kind of always had believed. I believed it in my head that Jesus Christ was the Son of God, and he was sacrificed so that I might be forgiven and rose from the dead. I mean, there's the basic precepts of Christianity, and
right.
I believed it, but not in my heart. Didn't have a relationship with Jesus Christ. And ultimately, that day, it was obvious that I was a new person and I had been reborn. And came home, and I'm not sure that my wife really recognized me. It was different, and I had to really question myself. I was concerned about being a Christian and owning a bar.
Right.
That was a big hurdle for me to get past. And it was my brother-in-law again, John, that said, maybe that's where God has you for a purpose and a reason. And as a result, it became more of a mission field than an obstacle to my journey of sanctification and faith. It gave me an opportunity to witness to others and to protect others from themselves sometimes, and to stand up and be a godly, bar owner, so to speak.
Right.
So it gave me some opportunities I wouldn't have seen otherwise.
So I know it's easy to come back from those kind of things and be pumped and be full of aspiration and change. How did you feel like it changed you more long term? Was it because you have to get back into the rhythm of life and all that stuff? How did that go when you got back into what you face on a day-to-day basis?
Sure. Well, I think the first thing was we had to connect and get involved with the church. And we did that through Clarendon United Methodist. And that was, my parents were there. So it really helped from fully reconciling with them, but them seeing my life come full circle. So becoming a part of the church body was important. I did get very much involved with Promise Keepers. I became an evangelistic volunteer. Went to probably 7 or more of their big conferences, both as a participant or as a volunteer. And that was eye-opening for sure. But, I buried myself in the Word and got to understand who I was supposed to be and how I was supposed to do it. But yeah, we definitely, I think I just got a new sense of purpose, and it drove me in the business world. That's when we started, doing Finney's on St. George in 96. So a year later, I'm like, what more can we do? Where can we find opportunities, and how are we going to build this company? I'll tell you one of the best stories that I'll never forget. And it was before my conversion. But I was very much a back of the house guy. I was a cook by nature. But I'd worked in the front of the house, so I understood the mentality of what I perceived as greedy servers and bartenders counting their money at the end of the night in front of a guy who's making $9 an hour and sweating for 10 hours in the kitchen. And it bugged me. And being the owner, I made it clear that I was not pleased with that. And I treated the front of the house staff very sternly, to say the least. I was not the nicest guy in the world. And Fincher took me out to Capital City to play golf one day, and we're on the third tee box. And I think even in my backswing, because this is more his style, he said, yeah, the servers hate you. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, well, they kind of fear you. And I'm like, good, they should. And I said, they're lazy, they're greedy, and quite honestly, I don't respect them. He goes, but you need to. He goes, without them, we can't do what we do. Thought about it for a minute. I said, but I just can't stand the way that – he goes, well, then turn them. Make a difference in their lives and show them to be more compassionate towards the back of the house team and get them to maybe see it differently and appreciate and respect them. And sometimes it's just not counting your money in front of them or thanking them or whatever. And that was a big turning point in me professionally to understand that my role as an owner could not be one-sided. And I also found out that not everybody fits in the same box, right? So I have to treat people differently. You can't treat everybody the same. People receive information differently, and you communicate to people differently. So that was a big turning point professionally.
And did you see a change in that in your relationship with the front of the house people?
Oh yeah, absolutely. To this day, I've been fortunate enough to lead so many people in so many different businesses, but I have a great deal of respect for everybody that works for me, and I have a mantra of the Big Five, and it's written all over the offices that I even now possess. And I hire people for character more so than I do for skill sets, although that's important. But my Big Five are hard work, respect, integrity, dependability, and attitude. And I look for that in people, and they can expect that from me. And that's what I think helps them feel more like a team member or a family member than they do an employee, because I treat them with that and I expect it from them. Right. And can't always figure that out in the first 15 minutes of an interview, but you'll find out in the first couple of weeks whether or not they fit that mold of character that makes a difference in the hospitality industry and has certainly made a difference in my businesses.
So after Paradise, you switch gears and end up at the foundation at the Florida Restaurant and Lodging Association. I did. And running that. So that's a pretty big lifestyle change.
It was huge.
So what was that like?
Well, Carol Dover had approached me. I'd been on her board for a number of years. I'd been a chapter president for the Florida Restaurant and Lodging Association. I just believed in their mission and their vision. And she invited me to lunch one day and said, listen, I like the way you operate. I like who you are. And I'd like you to consider finding a way to come work for me. And I said, well, what does that look like, Carol? I have no idea. And we'd been pretty successful at Paradise, and we had 7 companies at the time that she had sat down with me doing different things. And she goes, well, I'm really not sure I can afford you. I never hire anybody off my board, and I don't have a job for you. And I said, well, I hope you're buying lunch, Carol. And she goes, no, but I want to figure something out. And as it turned out, FRLA was acquiring regulatory compliance services out of Winter Park, an alcohol training division. And Chip Bone, who was head of the Florida Restaurants Educational Foundation, which oversaw 246 high school culinary programs, he was kind of laterally moving over to RCS to head that up. And the position for head of the Educational Foundation came up. And I said, wow, that would be cool to give back to high school students.
Yeah, sounds great.
It was a good fit. And it was a part of her senior staff. And I was like, well, if I can convince Fincher to buy me out or, then we can make it happen.
So your next venture is the most out of the box.
Yeah, it was bizarre.
Goes back to your early IBM days in technology, right? And that is the development of Kind Intelligence and the menuless menu management system.
Yeah.
So that is a innovative, brand new. So that's really a different path to take. So tell me where that came from and how that got started.
I got a phone call out of the blue from Jim Hunt, who I knew from church, didn't know him really well, but always admired him and his wife, Deb. And, he says, this may sound really crazy, but I met this guy. He's in Indiana. He's really bright. His name's Vincent Hunt. I'm like, is he your brother? He goes, no. We're not related at all. And he goes, but he's got this idea in his head that is just, I don't know, maybe you can make sense of it. And so I said, sure, I'll look at it. And sure enough, Vincent Hunt and I started to communicate over the phone, and he started showing me some things after I signed an NDA. And, I was like, it was pure genius. I mean, it was something so far out of the box for me, technology wise, but the introduction of applications through smartphones, I saw it.
Which this is just the beginning of the smartphone era.
I mean, this is really,
iPhones
2011.
Brand new at this point.
What they needed me to do was to validate its value within the hospitality industry.
Right.
And now that
you had the credibility.
And I had the connections. FRLA had really grown my statewide influence and connectivity to the industry, both from the food and beverage side to the hotel side. And so, when I started sharing the idea, people were really kind of, wow, if that could be done.
What was the idea?
The idea was to take menus, put them on the web in a dynamic way, using pictures, using food characteristics, such as it could be Chinese or barbecue or whatever, in addition to taking the big 8 allergies and using that in a format that allows people to create a profile so that they could actually find not just restaurants that meet their dietary restrictions or desires, but they could find actual dishes and pictures of them with dialed in nutritional content. And it went from being kind of a menu management system, which it was, but its ability to become a search engine was becoming kind of the direction we ended up heading in. And we ultimately raised $750,000. We built the platform. We needed a lot more, and most people don't know that these type of startups, you get to a point and then you need like $5 million, $10 million to get it launched. It's not an overnight kind of thing. And more than anything, we hit a roadblock in funding, and I tried to work with some angel investors. I traveled the state and to conferences for startups and through our pitch, kind of like in Shark Tank version, before Shark Tank. And we couldn't get it to where it needed to go. And it was unfortunate. I still believe in the idea. Nobody's really done it to the degree.
Do you think it was just ahead of its time?
I do. I think
technology-wise, or people weren't used to using their phones that way at that point?
It was ahead of its time. And, again, it's hard to get a lot of money to get to that next level.
Now, I know that was a financial risk for you, but you knew that it was going to be risky. So were you prepared for that, or was this a setback for you?
It was. I mean, it was a big financial setback, and everybody involved, needed to do something to support themselves and their families. And I hung in as long as I could. I was kind of last man standing, understandably. And my job was to run the business, and to I got to a point where I had to consider something else. And so I kind of, over the years and between the cracks and reading through the lines, I always did consulting. I love the idea of consulting, and love teaching and building businesses, whether it was licensing or whatever. And some of those opportunities came up, and, God is faithful, and I'll just believe that he's going to take care of my family no matter what. And Dr. Joe West at Dedman School of Hospitality, who was the department chair, had gotten involved with a guy from Brooklyn originally, Steve Fastberg, who developed the Brooklyn Water Bagel concept, and said that they were kind of struggling corralling the model. And so it became a great opportunity for me, because they were building one in Tallahassee, in College Town. And they thought that having, an anchor here, as well as somebody who was willing to travel statewide and across the nation to help kind of look at these processes. And so I got involved with them for
So you're
2
back
years.
in the game again?
I'm back in the game. So good story. I worked with them for 2 years. They got bought out by a billionaire by the name of John Preston, who owned North American Development Group, and they offered me a severance package to go away, and I said, sure, absolutely.
Yeah, if it's not going to fit, if it's not a good fit, if it's not going to work, then It's good to end it quickly.
Yeah, and we did. And, again, the timing was pretty good. I was already doing some work at the DoubleTree behind the scenes. And, that opportunity opened up pretty quickly.
Tell me about that. So you move on to the DoubleTree and take a property that's not doing so well and needs some refreshing, updating, kind of some transformation, and it's been pretty amazing what's happened there.
Yeah, so the ownership group that had remodeled the Hotel Duval had bought the DoubleTree, and JT was one of the investors in Kind Intelligence, and talked to me about the food and beverage program at DoubleTree. And in the past, it had always been treated kind of as an amenity and not necessarily as a business model, because the hotels, it was the largest full service hotel in Tallahassee with location A.
Right.
And so there wasn't a whole lot of emphasis on banquets, and, they did them, but there wasn't anybody leading them. And so I spent really, some time behind the scenes, 4 to 6 months, getting to know the team, doing some research. What could we do? And in December of 2015, came on as a partner, food and beverage partner, and was tasked with transforming the food and beverage side of it to match the transformation that was happening with the renovations they were doing on the inside and with the rooms and all the banquet space, and ultimately the development of the 17th floor, which is now built but not open. But it was great. It was a great opportunity. We, in February of this year, were given the #1 food and beverage operation for all DoubleTrees with 225 rooms or more in all of the Americas.
Wow. Congratulations.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It was surprising.
It's more than just facilities and, it's people. So is the transformation of culture and team, was that really what made the difference?
So that's, I think, where my strengths have, landed is culture. And we needed to change the culture. And I now do some public speaking on presentation I call Culture Shock, leadership with purpose. But ultimately, we needed major culture shock. There are people that have been there for a very long time.
When you're in an industry that has a lot of turnover like that, is that tough to build that kind of culture, or people who buy in have a tendency to stay around for a while?
They do. I've been fortunate. I've got very loyal team members that would follow me, to the ends of the earth, not because I'm some great guy, but because I've allowed them to do their jobs without micromanaging them, and allowing them to provide input. I don't have all the answers, Dave. I mean, let's be real. I'm not that smart, but ultimately, Steve Jobs once said, I didn't hire great people so I could tell them what to do. I hired smart people so they could tell me what to do. And what I've learned is the better I am at surrounding myself with individuals that are better than I am, the more success I'll have. And so, some you got to bring up, and some, but putting your arm around them and letting them do their thing is worked really well for me. And they did it. They deserve all the credit for that. If I get any credit, it's for finding them to do it. And again, going back to legacy, that's to me what's more important, is building others up so that they can reach their potential.
All right, so now let's talk about your current project, Savour.
Yeah.
You've been in the business for over 30 years, but this seems different. What is it about Savour that is different than all the other projects you've worked on?
I get to work with my wife. And, after that first year in 91 that I opened the Gables, I teasingly say, but whether or not, she'd work with me again after that experience, because she'd come up on the weekends and she'd help host us, and she was, part of the Gables. She saw what was going on. And I remember it this way. I don't know that she does, but that, she said, well, I don't think I'll ever work with you again, because I was still in that kind of control freak state in my life. And,
right.
But, fast forward 27 and a half years of marriage. And, when I knew that the DoubleTree was sold and that my time there was limited, and Avenue Eat and Drink had closed, and I knew a lot about that space. I had helped Chris Clark open it in terms of licensing. I was right there. I knew why it closed, so I was confident in the business model. It was a good spot. She saw it and said, well, why don't you think about doing that? And It's like, well, I don't know that I want to go back into the nighttime restaurant business, and it'll have a different effect on our family. Kids are older and, different stages and phases in their life. They need dad in different ways. And so she goes, well, I'd really like to remodel it. And I'm like, I didn't know you had interior decorator aspirations, but okay. So I started talking to the landlord, the owner. There were 2 or 3 other obvious operators looking to do it. And I talked to Mark Reichelderfer, who owns the property, and he kind of knew who I was and the experiences that I'd had. And he had to weigh and make a decision as to who was going to be, his tenant. And I, in many ways, was probably the least favorable, and in the sense that I offered him a 1-year lease. And he's like, 1 year? What are you talking about?
Right.
I want a 5-year lease and I want X, Y, and Z. And I said, listen, this is Tallahassee. I've been here for 34 years. Independents struggle with success. And here's the deal. We'll put a bunch of money into the space. And being Scottish means I'm very thrifty. So I don't.
I didn't realize that was a characteristic.
Oh, it is. It is indeed. Thrifty we are. And
except in kilts, nothing but the best.
Yes, that's true.
The finest fabric.
That's right. Yeah, you don't want anything itchy, I can assure you. But ultimately, I said, listen, I'll know in 9 months if we have a success. And I will give you notice that I will renew for 5 years after 9 months. And I said, in addition to that, it's going to take us some money and time. There's some things you need to do to the building. I will prepay, 3-4 months worth of rent so that you can fix what you need to fix with your building. And that's HVAC, electrical, plumbing, et cetera, that needed to be addressed.
Right.
So here, I'll give you a chunk of money up front. You fix what needs to be fixed with that money. And I'll take a 9-month, 1-year lease. And, I was fortunate enough that Kim did a phenomenal job with the interior decorator with the help of her cousin and her husband, who are interior decorators and contractors. And they came up from South Florida and helped transform it with the vision that Kim had. And we did it pretty quickly. And ultimately, she kind of created a canvas that lent itself to a specific restaurant. Well, over the last 10 years, I've been making a list of if I ever had, an upscale restaurant, these are the items I'd have on it. And Matt McCreelis from Southern Seafood introduced me to Brian Nepper, which has turned out to be like an unbelievable.
How key is having him to this project?
It's paramount. And
right.
When I met him, I was like, look, here's what I'd like to do. Here's the space that we have. This is what Kim's doing with it. What do you see? And I gave him the list of items I wanted, and he transformed them into things that I never could have imagined. I did a little crowdsourcing on Facebook. What one item would you like to see? And people didn't even know what I was doing.
Right.
I made it seem like I was working for a client. And
I think I suggested chicken fingers or something like that, which I don't see on the menu.
No, we do make them for those under 12. And so they're available.
Good. It's off the menu. So,
yeah.
Okay.
And probably not our best work. I don't know. But, escargot was the number one thing that we crowdsourced off Facebook, which surprised me about Tallahassee. And I'm thinking, I love escargot. It was on my list of things, but I didn't want it in garlic butter on a toast point. I mean, that was not my idea. When I asked Brian about it, the first thing he said was escargot pot pie. And I was like, what is that? He goes, well, I'll make a little, phyllo cup dough from scratch, and peas and carrots and this brandy sauce. I mean, it was just, and Brian came in and we started playing in the kitchen, and the things he's produced have been award-winning in a very short period of time.
And you've been overwhelmingly positively received by the very active Tallahassee foodie social media community.
Yeah.
Were you concerned about that? Did you feel like that? I mean, that's a different era than 1991 where people can kill you or, send lots of people to your door with a couple of posts.
Social media is a scary thing for operators. It'll make or break you for sure. I think Tallahassee Foodies and what Jennifer Leal has done is created an environment where there are a set of rules. and decorum when it comes to providing feedback. It's not that we're unwilling to take constructive criticism. It's how you go about giving it,
right,
and the opportunity you give the operators to respond to it before going public with it and shaming them. Everybody knows that if I go to a restaurant and I have the best food I've ever had, but I have terrible service, rude server, whatever the case may be, I'm probably never going back. If I have over-the-top service and I have mediocre food, but the service was just so good that I felt great about the experience, I'm going back.
Right.
I'm giving the food a second chance. I'm not giving the service a second chance. And so we have to make every effort possible to get that first impression right and get the service where it needs to be. And that's why I said the independents generally don't focus on that enough in training people about staff members, about wines, about food allergens, about the flavor profiles, about what has meat and what doesn't have meat, so that, there's just a lot of nuanced information you need to know, and they have to be willing to work for it.
We've talked a lot about Kim, your wife.
Yeah.
Tell me about her.
Oh, my word. Probably the wisest person I know. Filled with grace to have put up with me. Biblically strong, just in the word, and a true Proverbs 31 woman who supports me in everything. I put her through some things I shouldn't have, and I think over the last 20-something years, I've been doing everything I can to make it up to her. But she's incredible. We've home educated our children pretty much from day one. So she's not only a spouse, a wife, a mother, she's an educator. And she has the ability to discern things better than most. And she's just everything. She's everything to me and to our children, and the opportunity to work with her.
Yeah, I was going to ask, this is, rather than taking you away, you're together a lot here, right?
Yeah. And that's something that we haven't experienced really before. We're together in many nights, that we're doing this, and it is different experience, dynamic in the family now, missing dinners together as a family. And of course, our oldest son is in the military and he's out of the home. Our daughter is still in the home and attending college, and we have two boys that are 15 and 12 that are still at home. And what's been amazing is that the three of our children at home have been involved in the restaurant as well.
All right, just kind of wrapping it up here. Drew, what do you want people to know most about you?
That I'm far from perfect. That I regret my past sins, and I know that I continue to sin. But through faith, I've been forgiven. And having that knowledge allows me to be a better man as a husband, as a father, as a brother, as a son. For me, it's a story of redemption and forgiveness and love and grace. And I've received so much of it in terms of forgiveness and grace and mercy that to give it back now is really, really easy.
The name of this podcast is How I Got Here. Mm-hmm. So it's a kind of how you got to this point in your life. Where do you think here might be for you in 3 to 5 years from now?
I hope that I have an opportunity to tell this story to a lot more people. This is a great first step. I did not expect this. But I've always been intrigued by, public speaking. And I've started to kind of dip my big toe in the water, so to speak, doing some events for others, talking about leadership with purpose, talking about culture shock, talking about my life experiences and how they can be applied to not just the hospitality industry or food and beverage or hotels, but to any organization, really.
Right. Well, the principles apply no matter what you're doing.
They really do. And so for me, in 3 to 5 years, I would I would think that there may be some other food and beverage operations. But at the same time, I'm hoping that, maybe giving back in terms of some public speaking opportunities and consulting. At the heart, consulting is one of the things that I've already taken on new clients locally, looking at some out of town. But, that's probably what I'll continue to do, is to consult, to share my life experiences so that others can benefit from it.
Right.
Not make the same mistakes I made. And I made a lot.
That was Drew McLeod. And he would tell you he still loves soccer, Jesus, and making people happy at his restaurant downtown. And I'm pretty sure that if you had another creative way to use escargot, he'd be all ears. Thanks for listening to the show. You can subscribe at Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And while you're there, please leave us a review. It really does make a difference. Thanks to my amazing staff at Fiore Communications, who pick up the slack while I'm working on these podcasts, and to Troy Bloom for composing our theme music. You can hear more of Troy's creations on Facebook and Instagram at Troy Bloom Music. To connect with the podcast or suggest a future guest, follow us on social media or email us at podcast@fiorecommunications.com.